Surge is a female-led organization focused on securing women's place in Web3. So the main things we focus on are educating and onboarding as many women as we can into the world of Web3.
That mission has been sort of our North Star since the beginning, and it's been interesting to see how that has unfolded in many concrete initiatives. So excited to share a bit more of that as the podcast carries on.
Did you know that less than 5% of all crypto founders are women? How about the fact that over 66% of women working in tech jobs report that there is no clear path forward for them in their career? Or the fact that worldwide, women provide over $10 trillion worth of unpaid labor. You can find a lot more statistics like this, but the truth of the matter is simple. Women are underpaid and underappreciated in the global economy, in the tech sector, and even in Web3. That's where Surge Women comes in. Surge is an educational platform that is hoping to level the playing field for women and non-binary folk in Web3. They teach their community about Web3 in an accessible way, but they also help connect them to jobs, scholarships, and cool projects that they may not have found otherwise. Surge brings together thousands of women and has formed a community of individuals hungry to join the Web3 world. Their upcoming NFT project has a special utility that stays true to this mission. The NFT acts as a passport into the world of Web3, and it comes with loads of information, opportunities, and connections that Surge hopes will guide the owners of this NFT along their journey as they progress from newcomers in the space to seasoned veterans. I sat down with Denise Schafer, the project lead, and Juliette Chevalier, the engineering lead at Surge, to talk about the problems that women and non-binary folk are facing in Web3, and what Surge is doing to face these issues head-on. My name is Gio. I'm a writer and an artist. I fell in love with Web3 because of its potential to resist censorship and put power back in the hands of the individual creators who made the internet great in the first place. Welcome to Web3 Revolution, where we tell stories of real people making real changes in the world with the help of NFTs, crypto, and blockchain technology. The internet is changing, which means the way that we do business, art, investing, and even politics are changing too. Join us as we chronicle some of the coolest, strangest, and most revolutionary things happening on the new internet. This podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Before making any investment, you should do your own research and carefully seek independent legal, tax, and regulatory advice. Now, without any further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Where were you before Web3? What led you into Web3 in general? And then what led you to start Surge, and what were the conversations going on there?
It's interesting because when I was in university, I actually majored in political science and international relations, which, by the way, I loved. I definitely was in thinking I would never do anything math related. I ran away from anything very sciencey. And to my surprise, after I graduated, I started working for the government of Panama. And quickly started stumbling upon the classic bureaucratic problems that people go through. And so because I knew that, my time there was limited, I was very laser focused in making sure I would make the most of it and really, had some impact for my country and the organization. And that led me through several sort of rabbit holes. I started jotting things down, trying to spot patterns, trying to make my work there be as efficient and transparent as possible. And I quickly realized that a lot of the problems that we were having, not only in my government, but also at a multinational level, were coming from us using 20th century tools to solve 21st century problems. And that really is creating a clash between our existing population and the expectations that we have with our institutions, the speed at which they can provide services, and the level of effectiveness to which they can solve our problems. And so through that sort of eye-opening thought, I started diving deeper into processes. What things within my organization could I automate? What could I make more transparent and effective? And that led me through a rabbit hole very much deep into the blockchain space. I decided I wanted to create my own political tech startup. And the moment I started really hiring engineers and going through the process, I realized I didn't understand anything that anyone was telling me. I didn't know who to hire, who was better than others. I was just thinking, how could I lead this team of people that I understand nothing about what they're saying? And so at that point, I was like, all right, let me take a step back. I'll spend my next 2-3 months just learning programming at a deeper level. I quit my job. I moved to Berlin. I did a coding bootcamp there. And to my realization, I was hooked. I think from a strong end, just being in such a governmental space is very protocolar, very strict in what I could do. And then I arrived in the programming tech industry where change is encouraged, where the ideas are promoted, thinking outside the box is expected. And it was really sort of that culture that drew me in and sort of lured me into the technology industry. So after I finished my bootcamp, I started first freelancing. I decided I wanted to be a software engineer. I taught first as a TA, then as a lead teacher for the bootcamp in many cities around the world. I spent 2 to 3 years doing the whole like digital nomad gig until I eventually started working for a full-time software development firm from San Francisco as a software engineer. And that really sort of showed me the world of Web 2. I was building very, Web 2 stack, React.js, Node.js. For any developers out in the audience, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then once I left my organization, it really came down to thinking of what's that next frontier that I want to be building. And it was very easily going back to the roots of where I even started becoming an engineer in the first place, which is what eventually drew me into working as a developer advocate now for Aragon. So for those of you who don't know, Aragon is a DAO infrastructure platform that allows people to create DAOs essentially on the spot. So it's very fun work. And because I was going to be working there, I decided to enroll in a Web3 course called Kernel, hosted by Gitcoin. Little did I know, I get there, I meet Denise, and she's talking about the importance of bringing more women into the space. I was coming from a firm out of which 70 engineers, I was the only woman, and that was for years. So I knew the pain really well to heart. And so we just started chatting, and eventually this whole thing popped up. It was originally just a conversation and a few different ideas. And next thing we know, 5 months later, we're building a community of several thousand women and now launching our NFT collection, which is very exciting.
That is a story. Okay, you've touched on a lot of points I definitely want to come back to. But Denise, could you also tell me your origin story, and then maybe pick it up from where you met Denise and how it evolved into Surge?
Yeah, so I love Juliette's story, always super captivated by it. So I'm Denise. I'm originally from Peru. I moved to the United States when I was 11 with my family. Didn't speak any English at the time and learned that. So it's awesome because Juliette grew up in Panama, so we have a lot of similarities there. And then I started my career working in social media. I built a large audience for myself. Then I started consulting for other brands and helping them build their brands. And then I was doing marketing and branding. I've always been very energized by conceptualizing a brand and seeing it come to life, which is why Surge has been the best project up to date and really love it. And for me, how I started being interested by crypto, I heard about it in maybe 2016. I bought some crypto and Ethereum. Some Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2017. Never thought I would work in it. I just found the technology interesting. Everybody was talking about it. Fast forward to about a year and a half ago, I started reading more and more about crypto and about blockchain technology and the technical capabilities of blockchains. And I think there was a light bulb that just switched in me. And I think, a lot of people that work in crypto say this, that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I think that happened for me. So I went down a self-educating journey, went down the rabbit hole, did the whole YouTube and blogs and got my information a little bit of here, a little bit of there. I took a couple online courses. And throughout this journey for me, I had decided I wanted to work in crypto. I didn't know exactly doing what, but there was 2 issues that I saw in this journey that I wanted to help fix. Number one, I felt that there wasn't a lot of easily accessible and easily digestible content. You kind of had to go source it from all different places in the internet. And when I would talk to my friends who weren't interested in crypto yet about it, they found the language of it really intimidated. And that wasn't a very encouraging there wasn't a very encouraging way to get more people to enter the space. So I knew I wanted to work in changing the information pipeline and creating better content. And number two, as a woman coming in and learning a lot in my journey when I started playing around with NFTs and buying different cryptocurrencies and decentralized exchanges and jumping on these discords, the space felt very male dominated. So I knew I wanted to create a space for women to learn together. And fast forward to Kernel, which is where I quit my day job and just fully dove into Kernel and thought I was taking a break. I thought I was taking like an educational break, and sort of pitched my idea, met Juliette. We were super aligned. There was, instant connection, and then started working day and night on Surge. And it's been an amazing journey. And I'm excited to be here and talk about it.
I think not only from you guys, from a lot of women I've talked to in this space, I've heard a very similar message, which is, the information is not approachable, it's not accessible, it sounds too technical. So I was wondering if you guys could kind of like walk me through the different educational approach that Surge is taking and how you get people to the same point, and what's different from like the typical type of crypto information you would find on the web, as opposed to what's going on with Surge and what your approach is.
I think as we engage, like Denise was saying, in the Discord, you'll know it from the start. You're rarely one of the few women there. You go into projects and there's rarely women. And to be frank, like men are also doing an amazing job. They built this amazing space, and that's great and something to definitely admire and keep pushing. But I personally did feel like when you go in, it's like, I don't have any girlfriends. Like what girlfriends can like geek out with me about this? And that's sort of the energy that we've tried to build within our Discord. It's meant to be a real-time sort of learning experience where, we can feel sort of that feminine energy of being creative, compassionate, nourishing, and providing that insights. Women can feel comfortable just asking questions and getting responses. So that's one important bit. And then the other one is sort of our educational content. So we're making sure to keep the language very friendly, keeping sort of that same tone of relativeness with the confusion and the overwhelming feeling of coming into such a technical space, and also making it dynamic. So this actually is a great idea from Denise. We've built at the end of each of our articles a little quiz, so that they can go in and sort of test themselves to see what they learned and sort of map out if, there was something that they were missing, like, all right, sort of help you direct to where to go next. So these are some of the initiatives that we're taking in terms of education.
And Denise, this like issue in the crypto space isn't unique to the crypto space, right? I was looking on some of the educational content you have in Surge, and I mean, the stats are really crazy. Less than 30% of all software engineers are women. And of that, only 3% are African-American women, 6% Asian, and 2% Hispanic women. Over 22% of women, I think, feel imposter syndrome in the tech space. And I was wondering, like, how is Surge like trying to solve that problem? I know you guys are trying to get more women into jobs and into scholarships, and I would love to hear what's going on there.
Yeah. So one of the things that Juliette and I set out to do at the beginning was, we knew that we needed to create better content, and we knew that we needed a community, but we didn't know what else was going to blossom out of this and what else we were going to find out we needed to do. Right. And we listened to our community, and we saw this issue that not a lot of women, we started learning, and only 5% of leadership roles in crypto are actually held by women, right? As fast as this space is growing, only 5% of NFT artists from the last year were female. And this is also an issue that Web2 has. We found that only 5% of Fortune 500 company CEOs are female. So one thing that our initiative that we took that we're really excited about is called Search Web3 Jobs, where we've created a job board that's meant to be the place where all the top Web3 organizations come to solely hire women and non-binary individuals. So we have a vetted talent pool where you must be a woman or you must be non-binary to apply. And then the goal there is to pair people up within these companies. And the other angle of that is that hopefully by learning through our content and educating themselves through our articles where we simplify things, we can get these women jobs. And we've already had a few success stories. That's the most rewarding part of this, is hearing the stories of women who now are holding jobs at crypto companies who had a regular Web2 job a few months ago. So that's one big initiative we're taking to solve this issue.
Yeah, and I'm actually really interested to hear, like, I don't know, do you have any offhand of those success stories, like firsthand experience from people?
We do. We have a contributor list where contributors could come, especially at the beginning we were doing this, where contributors could come and help us out with, different roles like email, social media, etc. And we had a girl come in and she's really passionate about learning about Web3. She was kind of going through her own self-educating journey as well, joined Search, was really excited to find community. And she was really energetic, and she approached us and said, like, hey, I saw your contributor list. I'd love to help out in your social media. I'm transitioning from Web2 to Web3 social media. So we had her on. She was helping us out for 2 to 3 weeks. And the goal was to get her a job, because we knew that she was transitioning from jobs. And then through Search, through using the jobs channel on our Discord, she found a company that saw her work for Search, ended up hiring her. And now she has an amazing job at an amazing Web3 organization. And it feels really good. We were so happy, because that was the whole goal of having her help and show her work through us.
And I would say that even cooler than that is that now the organization that she works at is now partnering with us through their NFT collection. So it's just sort of like a big loop of which is honestly one of the parts I love most about the crypto space, is like really that collaborative vibe that I personally had never had in my career before, or at least not to this extent.
And then are you guys able to disclose what the name of that organization is that this person's working for, and what do they do?
They are actually called Hype Partners, and they started something called Hype Academy, which is actually, we partnered with them. It's a really awesome initiative. They've created a cohort for Web2, for anybody jumping from Web2 to Web3 marketing. And we actually partnered with them and extended 10 scholarships to 10 women in our community to take this course and make that transition from Web2 to Web3 marketing. So it's amazing to see how it all comes full circle and we can bring more people on.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I mean, I think you guys have noted too that like Web2 in marketing and all of tech industry has this kind of like gender disparity. And already this early on, we're noticing that in Web3. But I mean, how do you guys feel? Do you feel optimistic that that's not always going to be the case? Or are you a little more pessimistic and you're fighting the wave of the inevitable? What's the philosophy behind this?
Oof, that's a loaded question. I'll say that through my experience at Surge, I've become probably a lot more optimistic than I was beforehand. If you look at the numbers, it is pretty rough. And I think it's tangible when you go into like about teams, projects, and you rarely see a woman there. But the amount of participation, just curiosity that we're seeing in Surge, I think that's the big gate opener. And it's honestly the big reason why we're launching our NFT collection. We figured that a lot of the women were interested, they're curious, they want to start investing, and they want to be financially independent. They want to have their own Web3 assets and, speak the crypto language. But at the same extent, it's a bit hard. It's intimidating to get in. It's overwhelming, like the classic problems that we've been talking about. And so really our objective here is to make sure that token holders who buy our NFT feel like it's a passport into Web3. So we're partnering up with really cool organizations to make sure that whoever has that token immediately sort of has access, discounts, scholarships, and a bunch of different other perks that we're giving that make them feel like they can already sort of take a little bit of a next step and start engaging with these other Web3 projects without just sort of like having to find them on their own and, stumbling upon this like massive Web3 universe. And so I think that'll be really powerful into just including more female representation within the space.
You know, and I love the idea of the NFT passport because as you engage in the learning process, you already have a digital asset. And that was actually going to be my next question. How much can you guys tell me? Because have you officially dropped it, or have you just announced the NFT collection?
We've announced a sneak peek, but we can tell you a little bit.
Yeah, tell me everything you can, and I will pry no further.
Yeah. So the search, it's called the Search Passport. And we have an in-house artist who hand drew this and is working with our engineer team on this, on these women. You can actually see the sneak peek on our Twitter already. And it's intended to be a golden ticket to Web3. As I said, our community has focused on trying to give women skin in the game and trying to open up doors for women in Web3. And so we have some amazing partners who have come in from some of the top Web3 organizations, and they will be extending perks that can be used and claimed by the holders of this NFT because our community is so female centric. And so if you hold this NFT, you'll get access to a dashboard. This dashboard will have perks that you can claim. And these perks will range from educational courses to scholarships to discounts for tooling across Web3, subscriptions, and some other fun stuff that we're working on. So we're really excited. Like Juliette said, the goal here is to give as many women as we can skin in the game and eliminate this barrier to entry that can happen when you're starting to play around with the crypto world. And, it can be scary to just buy NFTs or join a DAO when you don't know much about it. So the goal here is that if you're jumping into Web3 and this is your first way in and this is your entryway, it comes with some other extra perks, fun perks to help you play around.
That's really cool. And those barriers to entries, I think sometimes are subtle and sometimes they can be a little bit more aggressive, right?
A common problem, especially now that everyone is a JPEG in the crypto space, it's honestly just hard to know what gender people is. And I kind of like that because it shouldn't matter. But it can come across when often like people just assume that everyone is a guy. Because to be frank, like most people are, so, to give them an advantage there. But it's definitely just that culture where it's just it's naturally not inclusive to women because it never has been. There's no really, the historical precedence of it. Now, having that said, I think a big part also what has made our community super valuable is that involvement of our men allies. I think, if we're just pushing this agenda forward on our own, we're definitely not going to accomplish all of our goals. It's a team effort. Like I think I aspire, to a day where it's not about women in crypto or women entrepreneurs or women leaders. It's like we're all just building this world together, and that's sort of the narrative that we really want to be pushing across. And so it's a matter of like understanding, I think, how the ecosystem is currently looking like, and through that data, then start sort of addressing the bigger pain points that we're seeing across. For example, a big one that Denise mentioned was that I think only like 5% of leadership positions within crypto companies are held by women. And like, that is a point where I'm like, all right, why? Like, who are the women that already are within the Web3 organizations? How come they're not pushing forward? Who is in the leadership positions? How can we make some policies within organizations to include more women? And it's sort of like that conversation that I think once we understand what the ecosystem looks like, we can start having, on a more concrete basis.
Yeah, and I think another crazy stat that we learned was out of 121 crypto founders today, only 5 of 121 are female, which is, of the top crypto company founders. And yeah, I think, we've made some jokes. For example, one time we asked our community, how many times have you been called bro on a Discord, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's not ill-intended. Nobody's trying to make you feel any certain way, but it's more just like, this is what's embedded in the financial culture. And so we're trying to change that. We're trying to bring in that feminine energy also and open up these doors for women and educate women from the beginning so that women can actually participate in building this new frontier and not have to try later once it's already built.
Yeah, and you guys are working with two different fields kind of at the same time, women in crypto and also Spanish-speaking women in crypto or Latino women. And I'm just wondering, I mean, like I'm half Mexican and I love that part of my culture, but I just wondering, like, is that experience been something different or an added layer to this? Are those discords like kind of like a different element? Are the projects happening different? Or is it more of like a meshed experience?
So I think that part has been very special to both Juliette and I, being from Panama and being from Peru. We realized early on that a lot of the interest in the people coming into the community were Latin, and we were super excited about it. And we were like, what can we do about this, right? And so we opened up a Espanol section on the Discord where it's just a Spanish chat. Everybody comes in, and it's funny. We send each other podcasts that are in Spanish, and we send each other articles that are in Spanish. And then after that, the next step after that, we were like, okay, why don't we find some translators and translate our articles and also start creating our content in Spanish. So we had a couple girls from the community actually volunteer to do this, which was awesome to see. We have a funny inside joke, but my mom is actually one of our editors. So she edits in Spanish. And then Juliette now wants her mom to be an editor. So that part has been really fun. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback there, because in Spanish, there's even less content and there's even less initiatives going on in a lot of these countries. So that part's been awesome.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to ask next, because Juliette, you're on the ground, you're in Panama right now, right? So in Panama specifically, but I guess Latin America in general, what have you guys seen as far as the movement? Is there just generally a lot less initiative and a lot less things happening? Or are there like very exciting things happening that are very powerful, but kind of dispersed a little bit more widely? Like what's the reality like over there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say I've seen a lot of things. Panama specifically from the beginning has been like in Latin America known as a bit like a crypto hub kind of thing. But realistically, the few things that really go on here, a lot of them are in English, mostly because they're driven by the expats that live here. And also there are initiatives in Spanish, but definitely not as many. So that's one front. I think the other big one is regulations. For example, in Panama specifically, if I were to withdraw my money from an exchange, I could get my bank account closed. There's no easy way to buy crypto. And so that rhetoric, is still very much present of sort of a resistance against the crypto space. And I think that hurts a lot of the general public's thoughts on it. We recently tried to propose a law. I was working on this team with a senator to push a regulation for crypto. It's already in the General Assembly. It already passed first debate. But it's sort of going into that conversation of how can we make sure to bring more stakeholders into the space. For example, in El Salvador is a great example of a country that like passed Bitcoin to be a regular currency. We're also seeing a big hype in terms of, for example, countries like Venezuela or Argentina who have a very fluctuating currency, whom they'd rather just use crypto because it's even less volatile than their own. So there are some interesting takes there based on the region's current situation, but definitely a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and I think everywhere in the world, people want in on this, and it's just really interesting when you see stories like China or India where the governments themselves are very resistant, and then the opposite where governments like Venezuela are like, hey, this is less volatile than our own currency. And but Juliette, like what has been happening with this senator, and what is the law that you're trying to pass, and what would that change, and maybe what are some of the opponents to that law? Why do some people think that law might not be a good idea?
Yeah, sure. So the senator who proposed it is called Gabriel Silva. He's honestly a fascinating politician in the region. He ran independently and won by a large margin. And his work has been spot on, especially in a region that's very corrupt and filled with scandals. His work is, I've been very impressed. And basically, he created a thinking group with a bunch of people within the country that were interested in this topic. And we drafted a law and proposed it to the Senate. So the interesting thing about Panamanian legislation is that we actually can't enforce citizens to use an official currency. So we use the Panamanian dollar, but the US dollar, but we don't have a central bank. And so what that means is that essentially we are in a perfect situation to embrace different currencies to transact throughout. Now, resistance has mostly come from the fact that because we are a very corrupt country and have Latin American classic struggles, people do fear that this is a tool that may be used for money laundering and for hiding resources. To my argument that like crypto is as transparent as you could possibly get, you would see every transaction, and it's even more open than others. But it's definitely a fear, understandably, that people have. And so what we're trying to do now with the legislation is push in some educational content. We're doing more and more events, trying to get the community that does exist and speaking to people within the presidency and just different aspects of the Panamanian government so that we can push this frontier. Panama has a laser focused on becoming the digital hub of the region. And so our big argument is that this is, the way to make sure that actually happens.
So I think something that I would like to ask is, how would you encourage people to get involved in the space? And after that, what would you advise them to do just to get started? What would be the best way to get started?
It's all about sparking curiosity, I've found. And like the moment you sort of spark that, my 3 steps for like crossing the chasm are usually: number 1, speak in their terms; number 2, provide new intel that creates curiosity; and then number 3, provide an alternate reality that, like, ideally with some skin in the game, that they can start playing with immediately. And I think once you sort of do all of those, it's very hard for people to not want to at least like read a bit more and find out.
Can you say a little bit more about that alternate reality? Like, do you just mean like AR, or are you like a philosophical alternate reality?
Well, the utopia, right?
Yeah.
Like, what happens if Web3 actually takes over the world,
Yeah.
and you start sort of bringing that into different spaces and what it could look like. And you start, adding in some of that rhetoric that the thinking gurus of Twitter are talking about every day. And just by posing, I think, a different structure to how society is set up and how we can sort of change the status quo with this decentralized technology is usually fascinating. And it's a big reason for why a lot of people are in the space.
Okay, so what is your utopia? Like, what is the one you tend to lean to when you're, getting people, onboarding them into this space? What's the ideal or the end point here?
Yeah, I love that. So I think it has a few angles, and we can probably talk about this for way too long. But I think a powerful thing is how we think of history. I did a minor in history when I was in university. And one of the things that I learned most was that history is really subjective, right? So they teach it as hard science in these books of like, this day happened that, when really, in order for any day to have an event, like there was a big transaction of things that went beforehand. And it solely depends on who was able to write that story, who defines what we understand it as being. And really, on-chain transactions change that. If we're able to have a record of every transaction that any address has done throughout time, you're able to create this on-chain identity that lives with you. I'm seeing a lot of platforms, for example, bring on this element of like an on-chain identity based on the POAPs that you have, the NFTs that you own, the projects that you invest in, the transactions that you've made. And you can really map out a person's interest and skill sets based on where they've been and what they do. And taking it further, at that point, we are really living in this digital world more and more. And so how we're transitioning into digital work, remote work, especially with technologies like no code that enable people to build software without necessarily being a software engineer, I think there's a lot of potential for digital inclusion that will be rising in coming years. And when you're able to layer ownership on top of it, it really brings a world that is a lot more inclusive and with aligned incentives. I think a big part of the problems that we've been having so far is potentially that incentives have been misaligned. Like if we have big companies who want to like keep our data so they can make money, so it's like, oh, maybe our incentives are misaligned. But I think the interesting thing about Web3 is that your users are really your investors. They're also your customers. They're also your contributors. And that sort of makes up a world where incentives can provide a more aligned output. And I think that's sort of the utopian version of it.
Do you want to feed into that, Denise?
I actually agree with everything she said.
Okay. I had like about 8 follow-up questions and you answered all 11 of them. So
Nice.
Well, guys, I want to thank you again so much.
It's been amazing. Thank you for having us and letting us talk about our mission.
Yeah. Anytime you want to come back, you are always welcome. And just please keep fighting the good fight.
Amazing. Thank you so much,
Same.
Gio.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, guys.